You've noticed it, some people cancel plans constantly, not because of emergencies, not because something dramatic happened. They just cancel, sometimes an hour before, sometimes the morning of. And if you're someone who rarely cancels, who follows through even when you're tired, even when you'd rather stay home, you've probably wondered what's actually happening in their heads. Because from the outside, it looks careless, it looks flaky. But there's a psychological architecture underneath this behavior that most people never see, and understanding it changes everything. Let's be clear up front. If you're someone who cancels plans frequently, this isn't about shaming you. You're not a bad person, you're not selfish, you're not fundamentally unreliable. What you are is someone whose nervous system, reward anticipation, and commitment structures operate differently from the cultural script we're all handed. And that difference is worth understanding, not judging. Here's what's happening neurologically. When most people make plans, their brain registers a future reward. Dopamine pathways light up in anticipation. A study from University College London in 2016 found that anticipation of social events activates the ventral striatum, the same region tied to reward prediction. For people who follow through on plans easily, that dopamine boost remains stable or even increases as the event approaches. Their brain continues to encode the plan as rewarding, but for people who cancel, something shifts. The dopamine curve doesn't hold. As the actual event nears, the brain recalculates. What felt exciting 3 days ago now feels like obligation. What promised connection now promises overstimulation, performance anxiety, or simple depletion. This isn't laziness, it's a recalibration of predicted versus actual reward, and it happens faster in certain nervous systems. There's also the question of what psychologists call temporal discounting. Humans are notoriously bad at predicting their future emotional states. When you make plans for Friday night on a Tuesday afternoon, you're not accounting for how Friday you will actually feel. Research from Carnegie Mellon in 2008 showed that people consistently overestimate their future energy and underestimate their need for recovery time. People who cancel frequently aren't deceiving others. They're deceiving themselves first. Future you felt manageable. Present you is exhausted, overstimulated, or emotionally stretched too thin. The plan was made by a version of you that no longer exists. Now let's flip the lens. Why do people who don't cancel plans hold firm even when they're tired? It's not purely discipline, it's identity. For many people, following through on commitments is tied directly to their self-concept. Breaking a plan feels like breaking a promise to themselves. It introduces cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort that arises when behavior conflicts with identity. A 2012 study from Stanford found that people with high social consistency needs experience measurable stress when they deviate from expected behavior. So they follow through, even at a cost, because not doing so would fracture their internal narrative. They are someone who keeps their word. That identity is load-bearing. But people who cancel more freely often have a different identity anchor. They prioritize internal state over external consistency. They are someone who listens to their body, someone who honors their limits, someone who refuses to perform when the cost is too high. Neither orientation is better. They're just different strategies for navigating the world. There's also a tribal psychology element here. Humans evolved in small groups where social bonds were survival mechanisms. Flaking on a hunt or failing to show up for shared labor could mean exclusion or death, so we inherited a deep discomfort around unreliability. People who rarely cancel are often carrying that evolutionary anxiety forward. They feel the weight of letting others down because their brain encodes it as social danger. But people who cancel more often may have a different risk calculus. They've learned, consciously or not, that the greater danger is self-abandonment, pushing through when you're depleted, pretending to be available when you're not. The anxiety of disappointing others gets outweighed by the anxiety of betraying your own needs. Here's where it gets more layered. Many people who cancel frequently grew up in environments where their boundaries weren't respected, where saying yes was safer than saying no. So they learned to say yes reflexively and then cancel later when the pressure was off. It's not manipulation. It's a survival pattern that outlived its usefulness. Others grew up in households where plans were fluid, where commitment was loose, where spontaneity was valued over structure. They're not being disrespectful. They're operating from a different cultural rulebook, one that was never explicitly taught but deeply absorbed. And then there are the people who cancel because they're chronically overextended. They say yes to everything because they want to be liked, to be included, to avoid conflict. But their calendar becomes a minefield of obligations they never actually wanted. Canceling becomes the only way to reclaim agency. It's a slow-motion rebellion against a life they didn't consciously choose. Let's talk about meaning for a moment. People construct meaning in different ways. Some people derive meaning from consistency, from being dependable, from showing up. Their presence is their contribution, but others derive meaning from depth, from only engaging when they can be fully present. They'd rather cancel than show up hollow. Neither approach is superior, but they create friction when they collide. One person feels abandoned, the other feels misunderstood. And both are right from within their own framework. There's also the issue of energy forecasting. Introverts and highly sensitive people often underestimate how much energy social interaction will cost them. A dinner that sounds fine on Tuesday feels unbearable by Friday after a week of meetings, small talk, and emotional labor. Extroverts, by contrast, often gain energy from social interaction. For them, canceling feels like losing a recharge opportunity. So when an introvert cancels, the extrovert genuinely doesn't understand. They're not being dismissive. They're operating from a fundamentally different energy economy. Here's the deeper pattern. People who cancel frequently are often dealing with what psychologists call preference uncertainty. They struggle to predict what they'll actually want versus what they think they should want. A 2014 study from the University of Chicago found that people who experience high emotional variability have more difficulty with future preference prediction. They genuinely don't know if future them will want to go out. So they say yes, hoping it'll feel right when the time comes. And when it doesn't, they cancel. It's not dishonesty. It's a nervous system trying to navigate its own unpredictability. And here's what rarely gets said. Some people cancel because they're protecting you. They know they're not in the right headspace. They know they'd be distracted, irritable, or emotionally unavailable. So they cancel rather than show up as a diminished version of themselves. It's not rejection. It's an act of care that looks like flakiness. If you're someone who cancels plans often, you're not broken. You're not immature. You're someone whose internal signals are louder than external expectations. You're someone who's learning, maybe slowly, that honoring your own rhythm is not the same as disrespecting others. And if you're someone who never cancels, you're not a martyr. You're someone whose identity is built on reliability, and that's valuable. But it's worth asking occasionally if you're following through because you want to, or because you're afraid of what not following through would mean. This is the kind of psychology we explore here on The Glitch Psychology. Not to judge, not to fix, just to understand the quiet mechanics underneath behavior that looks simple but never is. You're not broken, you're not behind, you're just playing a different game. And the sooner you understand the rules you're actually operating under, the less you'll waste energy pretending to play someone else's.